Welcome to AskFOI, where we answer the most common questions we receive here at the Friends of Israel on Israel, prophecy, in the Bible. Danny Kalisher is with me today. Welcome, Danny.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us from Israel. Danny, you've served in the IDF out of high school. You also now serve as a reservist, and you had spent time in Gaza after October 7th. The mainstream media often paints the IDF as this big army doing questionable things. At least that's how it is in the United States, in our media, doing questionable things to their neighbors. But that's really not what's going on. And I'd love you to walk us through this. How is the IDF different than other nations' military?
Thank you. It's a good question. I think the answer starts with what you already said at the beginning, that compared to, I think, most of the other nations, we have mandatory service for everyone, every citizen. Even though sometimes not all are going to the army, we're all required to go when we are 18 for about 3 years of mandatory service. And then we do reserve duty until around the age of 40. That's my example that I need to do. And it makes sense, when you think about that Israel is in constant threat from the moment it was established. We have threat from countries all around us, and don't let the quiet ears mislead you, because when it's quiet, it's probably because they're preparing for war. Our neighbors, sadly, are not peace lovers, and that is why the army service in Israel is so necessary and so important. And that's why it's also called the Army of the Nation, in Hebrew, Tzva Ha'am, because it is so tied together, and most of the citizens in Israel are having this experience of going to the army and being in the army. And I do think that the IDF is different on another level as well, and especially when it comes to a war or an operation. And you hear it in the media a lot, at least here in Israel. I don't know what other people in different countries are watching and seeing, but the IDF is fighting in a very unique way, and it operates according to a certain ethical code. And by the way, even inside Israel, not all the people agree that this is the code we should operate by. What do I mean by that? For example, when the IDF wants to strike in Gaza, they put down, or they throw leaflets of warnings to the citizens telling them, please leave the area. This is a place that the IDF is going to target. What kind of army does that? I've never heard of another army that, warns the enemy and tells them, hey, I'm going to bomb here soon, so leave the place. And when the citizens get those leaflets and those warnings, the terrorists get it too, and they have time to hide and, find shelter. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as the IDF is bringing humanitarian aid to the people in Gaza, and it's very clear and very known that eventually the humanitarian aid doesn't go to the citizen as people in the world would want it to go, but the Hamas terrorists are taking it and using it for themselves. So, and again, when in history there was an army that is feeding the enemy, and also, being criticized for not doing it as well as other people would want them to do. And also there are some cases in which, if there's a target, especially with airstrikes, when they see that there is a citizen, or they see that, there is the target, but he's next to other citizens, they will abort the mission. Even sometimes on a very high price, they will abort the mission. And also, as a soldier who has been in Gaza, I know that many times the instructions we get as soldiers is to be very cautious when we use our personal rifles. You don't shoot everything that moves. You always need to know that the person eventually who is standing in front of you really has the intention, has the ability, has the means in order to hurt you or kill you, and only then you use your you know wisdom in decision making to protect yourself. So I think the IDF is doing more than almost every other army I've heard of to stay humane, and not just to kill whoever is moving. And still, people are being mostly hypocritical and criticize Israel for not doing a good job in that.
Yeah, I think you bring an important point to light here that the propaganda, as I would phrase it, is immediate. As soon as the events, the massacre of October 7th happened, there was already a narrative against Israel before they even responded. So there's something else going on here, and I think it's spiritual. Could you talk about the spiritual aspect of why Israel is so vilified?
Yeah, I think you raised a very important point, which is something I would also want to mention. When you hear the news and you see what is going on in Israel and around the world, I don't see another way to explain what is happening besides the fact that it is spiritual. And it is the devil trying to work against God's promises and against God's plans, because God chose the people of Israel, and Israel is not perfect. I always say, Israel is not perfect, and I have a lot of criticism, towards Israelis as a nation and the government, everything. We're not perfect, and I'm not asking people to say that we are perfect. But God chose Israel, and God made a covenant with Israel, and He's going to stay faithful. And the devil wants to do everything against God's chosen people. So it is spiritual. I also think that on top of the spiritual blindness that so many people in the world have, is the way that the devil is using the media, because there are so many people who are also misinformed. And if I would be in the United States and I would only watch a channel that shows fake news from what is going on in Gaza, I think I would also have criticism on Israel. But that's the point. It's misinformation, it's lies, it's fake news, and people should really be aware, and also make sure that what they see is true, facts, and not just something that people throw in the air and without any basis or facts to stay behind it. It's a combination. It's a combination of both, but when people do not understand that it has a religious or a spiritual background or a basis to it, it's hard to explain what is going on.
I get asked from time to time, then where can I get my news if I can't trust the mainstream media? And one thing that I'll often say is that you want to get your news out of Israel if you can. Do you have a couple sites, include the IDF site if you can, but do you have a couple sites that you would recommend coming out of Israel that our viewers could tune into?
Yeah. So actually, the first thing I would like to say is that the most important thing is not to shape our worldview about what is going on through only the media, but first of all, through the Bible. People need to get their understanding of what is the nation of Israel, or what is the meaning of God being faithful to Israel, because eventually God being faithful to Israel has implications to all the Gentiles as well, all believers all around the world. If God is not faithful to Israel, why do you think He will be faithful to you? So that has big implications. So it's important that everyone, every believer, will shape his worldview on what is going on in Israel with the lenses of the Bible. That's first of all. And then if you're looking for reliable sources, I think that Friends of Israel also, whenever you have material coming out, it's a great resource. There is also another website. It's called All Israel News. It's actually run by believers, and they're doing their best to put out, facts and the stories without fake news, and bringing, the truth Um, it's hard to find media that is, reliable completely, even here in Israel. So I personally, I try to avoid the news as much as I can. But even when I do, it's either all Israel news or some local news. And even when I watch the local news, it's with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it's so important that you've exhorted us to look at news through the lens of Scripture and not reverse that, which in this age, it's easy to do, to look at our news feed before we look at our Bibles. So that's great advice. We'll make sure to link to those news sites that Danny had mentioned. And thank you for being with us, Danny.
Sure.